So to kick us off, talk about the crime that brought you here today and kind of what was going on in your life at the time.
So my ex-wife was coaching a girls 15 and under volleyball team. And I was assisting just to help out. I wasn't designated a coach or anything, but I would help just with everything. And that is how I met my victim. Do you want me to use her name specifically, or?
You don't have to.
Okay. That's how I met her. We had started talking over Snapchat, developed what I had referred to as a relationship. After that, I was having some marital issues with my ex-wife that I would discuss with my victim. I had convinced her to meet up with me in a park, where then I had coerced her into performing oral sex on me.
Okay. And so what else? What else?
Yeah. After that, while that was going on, I was also digitally penetrating her. After that, we had met up again a separate time at my house, where I had once again coerced her into the same thing with the oral sex, and then I had started to perform it on her as well. I had noticed her kind of differently at that point, where she was shutting down. She got real quiet. So I had stopped. I noticed her crying, and then she had left. And then shortly after, I believe the next day, was when my ex-wife had found some messages between my victim and I, and that's how everything kind of ended, and then ended up where I'm at today.
Okay. Sit back and you're going to listen to the victim statements. Heather's going to bring them on. All right. And they're going to address us and not the member.
Robert, I'm going to promote you to panelists, if you could accept that. Thank you. Robert, you can leave your camera off or turn it on when you share your statement. And then I know Valerie is sharing as well. So whichever of you would like to go first, go ahead and begin sharing your statements.
It's actually my wife, Natalia. I don't know where the name Valerie came up.
About that.
Yeah.
Go ahead and share your statements when you're ready.
Okay, Natalia is actually going to go first.
I just want to say that from the get-go, I feel that Mr. Brazier's reiteration of the fact is lacking. He engaged in quite a pattern of grooming with our daughter, and he used his marital problems as part of that grooming too, and the grooming included feeding her alcohol underage, encouraging her to keep quiet about it, and using his minor children as a mechanism to get her to go over to his house or to be around him or to Snapchat with him. And the consequences of this have been devastating on her and our family. She never did club volleyball again. She dropped out of volleyball in high school. The rest of high school was very difficult for her. Mr. Brazier's wife, unfortunately, spread a lot of misinformation with the volleyball players and with the public. And Frankie would be sitting in school and receive messages from people saying things like, "We heard you fucked your coach's husband," or things like that. And those would happen into 2 years after this happened. And it would she'd have to leave school, and she's been in counseling the entire time. She basically just wanted to finish high school as soon as possible. She graduated a year early after her junior year, and left the area because this has just been, it was horrible for her. She, changed her patterns of hanging out with friends, where she went around town. And when she is home with us, she's just very close with us, but she has very few friends from high school, and just a horrible memory of high school and her youth. And this is very definitive for her in her life. At the sentencing hearing, Mr. Brazier didn't acknowledge the harm he caused to her or to our family. He focused mostly on the harm he caused to himself and his own family. And we just feel that continues for him to underappreciate the extent to which he manipulated a minor and changed the course of her life for forever. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Robert, did you want to say something as well?
Yes. So, as far as the impact it's had on, it feels like she's always like, just a moment away from breaking down, having an episode, being in tears, being taken right back to that place of manipulation. And it's hard to see as a parent. You want your child to do well in life, and this set her back immensely. She didn't move forward with her education at all last year because she just wanted to get out of the area, so she graduated early. Frankly, she was just kind of on a mission doing online work to be able to not have to go to school her senior year and be around all those people with all those memories. She's going to try to go to college, and we just hope that works and that she can get through it and can deal with the stress on top of everything she's dealing with. She's still seeing a counselor on a regular basis. Those are things we hope she can move past. As far as the defendant is concerned, we have real concerns that he's a high risk of reoffending. Maybe not perhaps the same type of sexual abuse, where he gets in a situation where he can manipulate a child like this again. But there's just a lot of triggers right now that I see for him. He's got an alcohol and drug problem. He admitted that. He has had suicidal ideations, so self-harm was discussed when he was being investigated for this. And he's a perpetrator. He's abused people in the past, and he has a very stressful situation with his family life. It's all of those things together are a recipe for disaster. We think that it's very likely that he'll commit another crime in the future. And so we just want to warn you of that he's got a pattern of manipulation, and he frankly, from our perspective, it's hard to trust anything he says.
Thank you. Was there anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalia and Robert. This is Heather, and I'm so sorry I don't know where I got Valerie. My brain just spazzed out. So I am so sorry. Thank you for sharing your statements. We're going to put you back as attendees, and then you can just sit back and listen to the rest of the interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Hobbs, it's your turn. What are your response to what you just heard? Oh, sorry, Mr. Brazier. I looked at your counselor's name. Sorry, I'm very confused to do. So Mr. Brazier, would you tell us what your response is, please, to the victim statement that you just heard?
I mean, going through treatment, I realized how much manipulation and grooming that I had done, unknowing at the time of the crime, but now learning about myself and learning the things that I had done and the ways that I used, my kids and my family life to make myself vulnerable to that type of behavior, damaging, and not only to myself but to the victim and to the victim's family, and how she's going to go through life now, not trusting a male figure, or having flashbacks or nightmares or anything like that because of what I did. And I know there's nothing I can do, unfortunately, to take back what I've done, but I am working on making the correct steps to not repeat what I've done by going through treatment and learning, the ways that I had used manipulation and the immediate gratification that I had received, rather than just suppressing that and knowing right from wrong, and not feeding into that just immediate, like, hey, I need to do this. No, I need to slow down, take my time, think about things, and learn from everything that had just happened.
All right, so we've talked about substance use a little bit. Talk to me about your history of substance use and where are you with that today?
So for a very short period, I was using marijuana and edibles. I have not used any while I was on pretrial supervision, and while in prison, I have not been on anything besides my medication. So I feel like I've been, I believe it was 8.5 to 9 months that I was on the pretrial supervision. I didn't drink, I didn't do any drugs. I went to therapy regularly.
Okay, so about your mental health. So we're talking about depression. Anxiety. Is that something that is new since you've been incarcerated that you've learned about, or did you know about that before?
I had known about it before. I didn't really want to kind of believe it, as a male. When I was younger, it wasn't really a thing. It wasn't like mental health wasn't as big as it is now. I was on medication before I became incarcerated for my anxiety, and I'd been seeing a therapist before as well.
So were you on medications when you committed the crimes?
I don't believe so. I think it was after the fact that I got on the medications.
Okay. And so what's different since you started taking the medication?
I've been able to think things through a lot clearer. I'm not as, looking for the right word, not as just going out and doing something, not as like sporadic. It's more controlled. I can calm myself down. I can think things through rather than just going and doing things.
Okay. And my last question before I pass you over to a colleague, what are your plans in the space of substances and mental health if we were to move you forward today? What are you going to do in those places?
I definitely plan on staying on my medications, getting back to the therapist that I was seeing before I became incarcerated. If not being able to go back to him, then finding someone else to stay on that track, and then just continuing to not drink, not put myself near alcohol or drugs, and just stay away from it completely.
All right. Thank you for answering my question. I'll see if Jesse has a question. Jesse, did you have something?
I do. Hello, I'm Jesse. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too.
So you took treatment classes. What did you learn about your cognitive distortions? What were some of the ones you had?
Yeah, so a few of my cognitive distortions were impulsivity was one, viewing women as objects, sexual gratification, immediate gratification, and just learning that, I looked out for me. I didn't look out really for anybody else. It was more of what I wanted and not what was better for everybody.
Okay. And also, what did you learn your red flags were in SOTP?
Some of the red flags were alone with minors, alcohol and drugs, and then mixing alcohol, drugs, minors. Sorry, trying
Oh,
to.
you're okay. You're okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
My other question for you is, how many total victims do you have?
So through treatment, I had learned that I had 2 major victims. Obviously, the victim that we're here talking about today, and my ex-wife, because while we would have sexual relations, there were times where drugs and alcohol were used, so we could not consent. And then also there's what I kind of call like indirect victims, which would be like the victim's family, other people that were impacted by what had happened by my actions.
Okay. My last question for you, who's Graceland?
Graceland is my youngest daughter, or my youngest child. She's my only daughter.
Okay. So my question to you is, how would it make you feel if the same charges were upon her that your victim went through?
I can't imagine having to face that as a father. And I had thought about this question because I've been asked it in treatment as well. And it's something that, like, I never saw myself doing, obviously, before, and it happened. I'd be extremely upset. I really don't know how I would truly handle the situation, and hopefully, I don't have to.
Thanks for answering the questions I had. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jesse. Meredith, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So currently, what is your contact with or relationship with your ex-wife as far as, discussing your kids, or, what's your relationship like with her right now?
I don't talk to her a whole lot. A lot of the times her mother has the kids or my mother has the kids. So I kind of talk to my mom or her mom about them. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of contact directly with her.
Okay. And do you have any idea of what your co-parenting situation is going to look like in the future for your kids?
Yeah, we had talked about co-parenting, and she was open to trying to figure out what's best for everybody involved. And it was something that we kind of put on hold until I was released, to figure out the best steps moving forward.
Okay. Does she have all of the kids with her? You had mentioned grandparents earlier. So does she have custody of the kids?
Yes.
Okay. Is it just visiting the grandparents frequently?
Her mother does our daycare. She has since we've had this Easton, our second born. So
Okay. And then can you talk to us a little bit about, it looks like your plan is to parole to your grandparents. So can you talk to us about your relationship with your grandparents?
yeah, my grandparents. So I've never had a father in my life. So my grandparents, when we moved back to Dubuque from Michigan when I was extremely young, about 2-3 years old, my grandparents were kind of the first people to help us get back on our feet. I used to go out to Idaho to visit my aunt and uncle every summer with my grandparents. We'd drive out from Dubuque to Idaho and back. So I've spent quite a few summers with them, and we're always over there for holidays, birthdays, anything really that's a family get together is always generally at my grandparents' house. So I've always had a very good relationship with them.
And are they aware of the details of your crime? Have you talked to them about it?
I have.
What about any other support system that you have?
So thankfully, I have almost my entire family in Dubuque. My mom, my aunts and uncles, besides the 2 that live in Idaho. So I've got 3 uncles and 2 aunts currently in Dubuque. I have my cousins, which I have 2 male cousins, 2 female cousins that live in Dubuque. My sister currently lives in Florida, but she comes back every once in a while. so she'll be there as well. And then just a few family friends that I've known for 10, 15 years that are regularly either over at my mom's house, my grandparents' house, aunts and uncles, etc., that we're always together.
So I'm looking back at some of your SOTIPS assessments that you've done, your risk assessments, and your first one when you came in pre-treatment was moderate. It was 17 points, and then you're down to 2 after treatment. And reading them, and in the first one, there's a lot of victim blaming, and then post-treatment, there's some more accountability. Where or when do you pinpoint that shift happened for you when you started accepting that responsibility that you were the perpetrator?
So it was obviously after that first kind of interview, but before treatment had started. I really kind of just sat down and looked at myself and told myself the only reason I'm here is because of me. It's not because of what anybody else did. It's my own actions that led me here. And talking with other people and other inmates here kind of helped me like stand back and look at everything as you're the only person that could have put you here. Like it's not anybody else or anybody else's actions. And that's kind of when I realized like, hey, I need to check myself. I'm the reason.
What do you think was the most helpful module or class in SOTP for you?
My personal one would probably be the final disclosure, where we really got everything out there. The initial helped to kind of start everything, but that final part really helped to get everything out and to really hold yourself accountable for all of the actions that you had done.
And then my final question is, what are your plans long term? Do you plan to stay in the Dubuque area?
I do, especially with my kids. I don't want to not be around them, so that's my biggest things.
Okay. And then do you plan to stay with the same employer long term?
I do. I was working with Bowerbilt before I came down, and I really enjoyed working there. So hopefully I can stay there.
All right. Well, thank you. Those are the only questions I think that I have.
Thank you.
Do you have any follow-ups, Jeff?
I do not, thank you.
All right, so Mr. Brazier, now's the time. Is there anything you'd like us to know? Maybe you've prepared for us before we go into our decision making?
Over these last 2.5 years, I've had a lot of self-reflection, and I understand what I did was extremely wrong, and there's nothing I can do to take it back. But I have put all of my will and my being into becoming a better person and learning from that mistake, and really being able to be someone that can represent themselves into society and help maybe bring attention to what I had done, and so others can be prevented from doing the same thing, and reaching out for help if needed, and any mental health issues that people have going on. I can be someone that they can reach out to, and I can help in the future.
All right, is there anything else? Okay.
I really appreciate you guys taking the time to sit here and listen to me today.
All right, we'll sit back and take a deep breath. Just sit back. We're going to chat a minute. I'll be right back with you. All right, colleagues.
Let me get back to my notes. I can go first. I'm going to support the recommendation for release. You know, looking at the change in his SOTIP scores from moderate to low with a level 2 is, I guess, particularly compelling here. Also, you know, with the completion of SOTP, keeping him in prison post-treatment is just going to put him at risk of developing a higher risk score. You know, getting him out into the community will get him immediately into aftercare classes, which is important to maintain his low risk status and to, you know, continue to reinforce the lessons from SOTP. And so I'd be looking at that parole. We're not going to need any 10B or anything here since he's going to the grandparents. I'd be looking at the internet restriction, no early discharge, no contact with minors without approval. In the 40A, I'd be SOTP aftercare. I think substance abuse, at least just to get a baseline, because there was alcohol involved, mental health, medication compliance, and then a 50A as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I have some reservations. Even Meredith had said that, there was a lot of victim blaming the SOTIPs. And then when I heard him say in the interview that he was going through marital problems and he was talking to the victim about this, and he made his marital problem basically the victim's problems. That's where I was struggling a little bit. But I do agree with what Meredith said about treatment and aftercare. So I am going to be in support of this DSC recommendation to release the grandparents' place with the same codes that she had mentioned.
Okay. All right, and I too am in agreement. So I just want to make sure that Frankie's parents, Robert and Natalia, know that we heard what you have to say, and this is a very terrible crime. And I know that this is, no matter how much time you would spend in, it's not enough time to fix the damage that has been caused. But I was impressed today. I think Mr. Brazier took responsibility for his actions and has learned quite a lot about himself while being incarcerated. And I see a different person in front of us than I see on paper, for sure, about with mental health help, knowing that that's a key to the direction that he needs to go. So what we're going to do today, Mr. Brazier, is we are going to parole you to your grandparents' house. We do have a lot of coding here. So what it means is you have an internet restriction until you work that out with your parole officer. 20B means you're going to remain on supervision through your discharge date in July of 26. You're not going to get off early. You have no contact with minors unless you go through the approval channels to get notarized letters to do so. And then for treatment, we're going to ask you to do quite a bit. We're going to look at having SOTP aftercare to continue in your treatment, to get a substance use evaluation to see where you stand on that, since that was part of the issue of continuing your mental health journey, and to continue on medication. That does not mean that you can't stop your medication. That means you need to do that with a professional when you make those choices, okay? And then finally, it's going to be a 50A, which is an alcohol prohibition. Don't need to be drinking it and hanging out in places that primarily sells it, like liquor stores and bars, okay? All right, congratulations. Go out and do well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you for taking the time today.
Thank you. That concludes your interview.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
I have to say that we cover these cases, the Iowa cases, specifically to call out what is completely transparent injustices of our system. These cases are frustrating. They are hard to watch. And I was talking about it with Richard on email. I've still never heard his voice. And it's hard to do the Iowa hearings because we pretty much know the result, and they throw mud in the face of the victims. They throw mud in the face of common sense. They throw mud in the face of the judiciary. None of this made any sense. None of it. A judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison. That sentencing just took place in 2021. He had a good time date of 7/14/2026. He wasn't locked up until 1/10 of 2022. 2 years and 6 months of the date of this hearing. His wife is a volleyball coach. She is trusted by the parents, by the school. This is for a school. Her cockroach husband finds a way to finagle his way to be an assistant. If you think that's a coincidence, if you think that just happened by chance, I have a bridge to sell you. He then grooms her as the parents speak up and tell the truth of every lie this cockroach left out. He grooms her. He becomes friends with her on TikTok or on Snapchat. He uses his own kids to facilitate the relationship and to hide it. He then uses alcohol in the grooming process. And he slowly does that until he finally gets caught. He doesn't mention the alcohol. He doesn't mention the group. He just does it like, well, I went there to teach, and then I had marital problems, and we went to the park, and that happened. And then she came to my house, and that happened. And they reward him for the lies. They reward him. You hear the lives that this destroyed. The lives that this destroyed, and they reward him. But what makes no sense, I mean, none of it makes sense, is that she uses the words, the parole board member, whoa, is that she says, keeping him in treatment in the DOC would risk him getting a higher risk score. Getting him in treatment on the outside would increase the chance of a lower. What are you talking about? Where can you even unpack that? Wait, so being in prison is a higher risk of his risk score going up in treatment? Really? Is that a fact? I mean, is that it? We know that makes no sense. Anyone with who like you don't need to be a rocket scientist to have your PhD. I know we don't have our PhDs. I'm just a Mandoo, but my brain is not that warped where I can't figure out the logic in that. It's like, wait a minute, 1 + 1 is 3. You're right. But even if you wanted to say that we don't understand that 1 + 1 is 3, couldn't you understand that if he has a risk of getting a higher risk score by being in prison, then that he's just a risk? That maybe he should stay in prison? It's like when it's sensory overload when there are so many things wrong with this hearing. I don't even know where to start. Look at this. Look at how he answered this question. He just, that we've had a few in it. They all look the same. Don't tell me he looks like me.
Through treatment, I had learned that I had 2 major victims. Obviously, the victim that we're here talking about today, and my ex-wife, because while we would have sexual relations, there were times where drugs and alcohol were used, so we could not consent. And then also,
did you hear that? What? This is when they asked him, who are your victims? I have 2 major victims. Of course, my victim, and then my wife, because when we had sex, drugs and alcohol were used, and that can't be consent. He said that. It's like, what? What are you saying? No, your wife is a victim because her job was to be a volleyball coach for little girls, and you completely wrecked her life. And to her credit, by the way, and thank you, Richard, for pulling these notes, she divorced this roach just 3 months after, which is probably as fast as you can get the process. And I mean, in 3 months, that's pretty fast. And we're so accustomed to seeing them abide by it, and you almost got that impression from him that she was okay with. No, she divorced his ass 3 months after. You wrecked her life because you wrecked her life. Her husband abused her students. Sex, drugs, alcohol, consent. What are you talking about? He's safe to release into society. Not only that, but he was also referring to his victims as women. He said, I need to learn to respect women. These are children. The parole board is disgusting. They're useless. This is why we do this to call. This board needs to be seen for what they are, which is pathetic. Really, they are a danger to society. It's like we can look at these roaches and say how this, but he's not. He's a roach. This is what he is. He's wired. His wiring is broken. And even when he got in prison with a moderate score, and you can tell even now he's clueless. He doesn't get what he is. Listen to the parents, how they spoke. Listen to him victim blaming. Listen to everything that he has said and done. And they parole him. I'm going to read the article. Here, I'll share it with you. This is written in October 26, 2021. He pleads guilty to sexually abusing girl. He pled guilty sexually abusing girl younger than 16. This is just legislation. I mean, we know she was younger than 15 because that was the volleyball team, right? Could have been any age. Could have been 13. Could have been 30-year-old Danielle Brazier entered the plea in Iowa District Court to 2 counts of third-degree sexual abuse. He now faces 10 years in prison. However, his plea document states that he seeks deferred judgment. With a deferred judgment, if probation and payment obligations are successfully completed, the record in this case is expunged. Can you imagine? We have heard about cases like this. Now, thankfully, the judge had a little bit more common sense. A report says that he's a girl younger than 16 twice in the past year, once at the park and once at his residence. Can you still imagine that the DA lets him get away with this pathetic little plea deal? I mean, can you even imagine that? He grooms her. There are so many charges you could have gotten him with. You could have locked him up for years and years and years and years. You have the evidence through the apps. There's alcohol. There's all of the charges you get, but all they did was do that plea deal. And I bet you the victims didn't understand the plea deal. They think, because you read about it and you think, well, it's 10 years. She doesn't need to go to this. Is so traumatizing. She's still in the school. Let's just sign it and get it over with. But did they know? Did they have any idea that he could have a good time date 4 years later, or that he could possibly get paroled 2 years later? And again, I can't get over the fact that this idiot insane board said keeping him in prison would run a risk of his risk score getting higher. But here you go. And you probably wouldn't believe it if you didn't see it. And with that, I'll let you go.
What red flags or risk factors have you been able to identify for yourself in treatment?
So I have manipulation as a risk factor, sexual interest in coercion and rape, interest in children, impulsivity, using drugs and alcohol to cope, using sex to cope, lack of intimate relationships with adults also is an issue for me. Those are the big ones that I have to pay the most attention to, and that I've been monitoring to see what are warning signs when they come up, so I can recognize my pattern. So I know that, oh, this risk factor is kicking in. I need to go talk to somebody or understand why that risk factor is kicking in.
Okay, can you talk to us about how you recognize that those risk factors are starting to become a problem?
We are about to watch the parole hearing for someone who was sentenced to 25 years for what they did to the child over and over and over again. There's, of course, much more in this hearing that we're going to go through that might frustrate some of you. We'll unpack it with all the details at the end.
So it looks like, so we have Demas next, and is her preferred name Jade?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay. Any updates or anything that we should know about her before we bring her in?
No, I will tell you that I think at times she's been incarcerated for a very long time. And I think that this possibility of release has got her maybe hyper-focused a little bit on it. So I think that's kind of been the focus, and maybe it's not that she's made bad choices by any way, but I think that she's just been a little bit more vulnerable, if that makes sense. But I think she's very hyper-focused on what she's going to do when she gets out and how she's going to be. I mean, I think she's been laid down for 20 years, so a lot has changed, and she knows that. So.
All right.
I don't.
We're ready to bring her in.
Let me go get. You can sit in my chair, and then I'll just sit right by you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Could you please state your name, your preferred name, and your state ID for us, please?
Justin Demas, Jade, and 683-3460.
Thank you, Ms. Demas. My name's Meredith Lamberti, and here with me are Renee Schulte and James Moses, and we're the 3-member panel of the Board of Parole who are going to be talking to you this morning.
Okay.
All right. Why don't you start by giving us, a brief but detailed explanation of the crime that you committed, and also, what was going on in your life at that time.
So I committed second degree sexual abuse and indecent contact with a child. I was a babysitter for a family that lived in the same apartment building as me, and the youngest son and I got close in that, and then I ended up sexually abusing him because he ended up staying with me a lot. At the time of the stuff I was going through when that happened, I had been raped in high school, and I was dealing with not talking about it, and I had tried to commit suicide, so I was still recovering from all that stuff. So I had been resorting to using drugs and alcohol, scared to get into adult relationships, and partying a lot, underage drinking. So.
How old were you at the time?
19.
Okay. So I want to back up a little bit. You had said that you turned to drugs and alcohol as one of your coping mechanisms.
Yes.
What drugs were you using, and like what was your use looking like? How often, and when did it start? Things like that.
I used marijuana and crack. I didn't use the crack very often. I only tried it like 3 times with one of the roommates I was living with. But marijuana, I kind of just used at any party we had. So like we had parties every week, so at least once a week. And I got introduced to marijuana by a friend in high school. So, and then I got introduced to crack by one of my roommates.
And then what about your alcohol usage?
My dad was very lenient on letting us drink underage as long as we stayed in the house. So I got introduced to alcohol when I was in 5th grade, and it was just considered okay as long as I stayed in the house. So.
Around the time of the crime, how frequently would you say you were drinking?
3 times a week, starting on Fridays, normally to Sunday night.
Okay. So kind of like binge drinking over the weekends?
Yeah.
And then you had mentioned your mental health. So can you
Yes.
talk to us about where you are at right now with your mental health and medications?
Right now, I'm actually doing really good with my mental health. I even set up my own mental health plan for when I get out on my own, and then ran it through my counselor to let her know. I've learned about EMDR therapy. I was going to start it when I was at Clarinda to work through the trauma from being sexually abused. And I ended up coming back here for treatment, so I didn't get to start it. But I've already had with the psychologist here a meeting with the lady I'm going to do. I had a false positive because of the lamotrigine that I'm on, made me have a false positive on a UA just last week. But they found out it was a false positive. I communicate really well here with the psychologist and my counselor. When I first got here, we made a wellness plan for me. And then I'm redoing the wellness plan again for when I get out to have all that stuff together.
Okay. I do see a note that it was a false positive. Thank you for that. So you've been incarcerated for a very long time, right?
Yes.
So do you know or have any connections out in the community where you're going to go, or are you aware of, I know you identified a number of places that you can go for mental health and medications. How familiar are you, I guess, with the community that you're going to be going into?
I grew up in that area, and all my family is still in that area, so I know the area really well. I'm very comfortable there. I know, even the mental health facilities to go to. I know where they're at. I know some of the staff that was there, and then my sister is a nurse, so for the gender dysphoria stuff, her boss actually already sent me a thing saying that I can go work with her on that because that's in Oskaloosa in that area. So I'm pretty comfortable with all that in that area. So
Okay, that's good to hear. So you mentioned your sister, and I think I see some notes about your mom also being a support person for you. Is that right?
yes, but I got to be careful with that because she also victimized me as a child. So I'm only trying to be around her a limited amount of time because I want to make sure my mental health stays stable and not go backwards.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other people that you have as a support system for you in the community?
My brother Jake, who's my trustee. I have an aunt and a cousin and a few other aunts and uncles in that area, and then my oldest sister, Tabitha, is there. So.
And then I think my final question for you before I let my colleagues ask questions are, what red flags or risk factors have you been able to identify for yourself in treatment?
So I have manipulation as a risk factor, sexual interest in coercion and rape, sexual interest in children, impulsivity, using drugs and alcohol to cope, using sex to cope, lack of intimate relationships with adults also is an issue for me. Those are the big ones that I have to pay the most attention to, and that I've been monitoring to see what are warning signs when they come up so I can recognize my pattern. So I know that, oh, this risk factor is kicking in. I need to go talk to somebody or understand why that risk factor is kicking in.
Okay, can you talk to us about how you recognize that those risk factors are starting to become a problem?
When it comes to the sexual interest, I normally, my body temperature gets dropped. Like I feel like ice cold and like almost like I'm touching an electric fence, getting shocked. And so then also like my ears will start ringing, and I'm realizing that, okay, my body's kind of thrown off here. It's interested in something. So I've learned to pay attention to how that feels and be able to pay attention that, okay, so where am I at? Who am I around? What is causing that? And narrow in on it and figure out how to remove myself from the situation or go seek help and talk to someone on here's been my support system that we made in my wellness plan. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna see if my colleagues have any questions for you now. Renee?
Yeah, Jay, just a couple of questions. So you've been in for a very long time. So tell me what's one of your biggest concerns about being released? What are you worried about?
I think the biggest concern is adjusting after being gone for so long, because it's been almost 2 decades. So there's a lot that's changed. And going out living as a transgender in an area that I know really well, but most people only know me as my past in that area, and trying to show like that I've changed, I'm not that person, I think is going to be the biggest challenge, because people in where I grew up change is really hard for them to accept and realize in some people. So I think that's going to be my biggest challenge, is not backing down from being the person I am and staying focused on that and not trying to give up on myself just because they might give up on me.
And I'm going to ask the opposite. What are you the most excited about if you were to move forward?
Getting to transition further than just where we got to go in prison. And I want to continue my education because I want to start eventually a nonprofit that works with ex-felons and their families, so they have more support in the community and build better reentry. And I think that it can start when you're in county jail. So I think you can work through it all the way through the prison time and the county jail time, and then upon release. So I want to work on that eventually as a long-term goal.
All right. Well, thank you so much for answering my questions. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
James, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Jade. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Hey, doing pretty good. I saw that you completed a degree, associate's degree at Iowa Central.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I had started at first when Newman offered the Grinnell program. I started doing that, but I was struggling with that because I didn't want to change my behaviors, and I wasn't recognizing how my behaviors were actually affecting me. So I ended up gradually shifting to Blackstone Career Institute, and I earned my paralegal for that. And that got me into a rhythm of staying on time, time management, completing a goal. And so then I went and I started doing, when they brought in the Iowa Central program, I decided to pick up on that. And it was a fast pace, but it made me actually sit down, and I had to start working on goals. So I had to sit there and know that this is what I gotta do, and I had to reprioritize. So instead of thinking inside prison and the environment I dealt with every day in here, I had to think outside. What is my life like? Actually prioritize what's important to me, and getting my education is extremely important to me, and I want to further that education. So I had to make sure I put myself first versus putting people in prison that I've met and those kind of relationships over myself. So it allowed me to grow, and then I got to help other people that would start the program after us, and like I got to be their tutor and show them how to work on the system, like with the homework and stuff. So that made me feel better because it was giving back to not just for the college who took a chance on all of us, but it was giving back to my classmates and helping them, encourage them to move forward just as much, and that change is possible for all of us. So I really liked it.
Yeah, I hear that in your sharing as you were answering the second part to my colleague's question. So in terms of what are you excited about doing if you were released? So
yeah, I would like to go on to my bachelor's in business marketing.
All right. And then when I hear you say business marketing, what ideals do you have?
Well, I figured since I'm nonprofit, a lot of like the to like get the funding and all that, you're gonna have to have creative marketing strategies, especially when it's trying to make people comfortable with working with people that are in prison and incarcerated. But so, and continuing that, I feel like you got to step outside the box, challenge your creativity, and it also builds up really good communication skills with people. And I'm kind of looking forward to that for business marketing because it challenges me to always be interactive with other people.
Okay. And then my last question, what would you say that if I was to ask you to state 5 values that you have today that you didn't have prior to being incarcerated, what would you say those 5 values would be? Or if there's more than just 5, then please share those as well.
Honesty. I like to always used to lie or tell half truth. And I found out being honest is a lot less stressful. I don't have to remember everything I said and try to keep the story straight. So honesty, I've gotten like I used to think family was important, but now I realize it's just relationships in general are important because your family is not necessarily going to always be there. And I've learned that through doing such a long period of time. But you can actually build necessarily a better family for yourself by the people that actually want to stay by you, support you, so they don't have to be blood related. So I guess families took it on a different meaning, but it's still the same important to me. Accountability is a huge thing for me. I think that you always have to hold yourself accountable and not put it off on other people. Make sure making sure you're using your I statements, and don't blame your past situations because you still, at the end of the day, make your choice. I believe your attitude is important because every day you wake up and you make that decision, not somebody else. Even if somebody else is having a bad day and they're taking it out on you, it's still your choice to let that affect you. So those four are extremely important to me. And then my faith has become very important to me because it's a way of self-expression, but it gives me a purpose to be who I am and focus on what I want and try to encourage other people to do the same thing. And then I also believe in just self-identity, which I never really valued before. I always tried to please other people and do what they expected me to do. And finally, for the first time in my life, I'm actually living for me, and that by being transgender and admitting my truth. And so self-identity has become extremely important to me.
Jay, thank you for sharing. And that concludes my questions to you today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Renee, any follow-up questions?
No.
All right, so Jade, now is your time to tell us anything else that you would like for us to know or anything that you might have prepared for us today.
So I've learned that by being in prison, like I still feel in a sense that by coming to prison, like I got off pretty easy because I had so many charges that were quarter 70s and they ran them all together. And after taking treatment and putting myself in my victim's shoes, I realized that that was a blessing to get my sentences ran together because technically, like I would feel like I would have deserved to have them ran back to back because I did that to someone else so much. Through my own experiences that have happened in prison, I've learned to be both what it's like to be victimized and also to have done the abuse. So I've got a different output on that with like just how that affects the person. And it's allowed me to grow as a person and get to know more about myself and actually show more empathy towards other people and not be so self-centered and wanting what's mine, feeling entitled. So I don't have to worry about that. And it's allowed me a lot of self-growth and be more helpful for other people, like just even being like someone to listen to and encourage it. And if I can show that and I can do that for myself, then other people can do that.
Is there anything else that you'd like for us to know before we start our deliberation?
Hold on. Do I need to tell them about the investigation? Nope, that's it.
All right, well, sit back and listen and we'll let you know what our decision is. So
Okay.
Renee or James, what are your thoughts on the recommendation of parole to the work release?
I'm going to be supportive of the parole today. I thought this was a really good interview. Sounds like they've really been taking treatment to heart and learning a lot about themselves in treatment, learning a lot about what they like and don't like, and understanding the importance of medication and how it's been helpful. I was really actually very impressed with today's interview, and the desire to continue education and to go out and help others is also a way to give back, which was also very impressive. So I'll be paroling them. I think there's the 10H we discussed. There needs to be a 30A for minors, given the type of crime. On the 40A, substance use, mental health, SOTP aftercare, and medication compliance, and a 50A.
Okay, James?
Yes, thanks, Miranda. I too, like my colleague, I was impressed with Jade's interview. I thought she was very transparent. I really enjoyed hearing what her values are when she talks about being, honesty, and how she, described family, not that it's been the best or supportive, but understands family, but trying to, I guess, find the right relationships that helps to develop the family that I think she wants to be around. She spoke of accountability, which is what I like. Just her just telling the truth and being truthful as she can be. So it minimized any ad libs or any untruths. The attitude, knowing how, that the individual is responsible for their attitudes and how they can shape their day. And then her faith, just having that spiritual, holistic foundation. And it was not intriguing to hear about her being comfortable with sharing her self-identity, wanting to tell her truth in her voice, and then just what she was able to accomplish with her associate's degree, and looking to further that, going into presumably a non-for-profit. So I too, in agreement with my colleague, to support DOC's position. Codes 10B, what was I at the residential facility, 30A, indirect contact with minors, 30C, 40A, still addressing the mental health. I think some cognitive classes will still be good for her, and substance abuse, just that checkered past, with debt, allowing her to drink at the young age of fifth grade, and the 50A, the alcohol. But the other one is continuing her therapy and finding places to lean on that really helps to support and give her the solid foundation around her that she needs in preparation to transition.
Right. So I'm also going to support this recommendation. I thought that Jade was very transparent with us in our questions, and we asked difficult questions to talk about her red flags, and she was obviously to me, it seems like she's done a lot of work on recognizing those risk factors for herself, talking about being in tune with her body temperature and how to remove herself from a situation that's dangerous for her is a lot of self-reflection. And, with this being a second charge, there's no special sentence. So if we want any transition period of supervision with a TDD of 28, I think this is a good time for release for that community transition. So I want to sum up. So this one, because we'll have to see her again, it's going to be the 10H. I have a 20A for limited internet usage because there's a minor victim. 20B, no early discharge. 30A, no contact with minors. 40A, SOTP aftercare, which James, that would cover the cognitive, but it would be the Good Life has the cognitive element. It's just aimed toward people with sex offenses. And then substance abuse, mental health, medication, and then the 50A. Did I miss anything? All right. So Jade, you heard our discussion, and we are going to grant your parole today. You heard our comments about your interview. We appreciate the honesty and the transparency that you had with us today. I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what we were talking about so you understand your parole order. So when you leave, you'll be subject to all the standard terms of parole that everyone has. And then what we do as a board is we place additional special terms of parole, and that's what we were discussing. So the first one that's important, it's a 10H. And what that means is that you're going to parole to the work release and start there. But your charges, sex abuse second, requires by law that before you leave the work release that they submit your release plan for street parole to us to review and approve. You won't come back to us for an interview, but we will just review your parole plan on paper. And that's just required because of the charge. It's nothing that you did in the interview or didn't do in the interview. That's just a function that we have to do. The 20A is limited internet usage. When you go out, because you had a minor victim, there will be some limitations on what you can and can't access for the internet. You will be able to do things like job seeking, but you will have some limitations on social media and things like that that will line up with registration requirements and SOTP aftercare requirements as well. A 20B is no early discharge, so you will stay on parole until your TDD in May of 28. 30A is no contact with any minor children unless it's approved by your PO. The 40A, those are treatment codes. So those are things that we'd like you to engage in the community. SOTP aftercare classes. We'd like you to get a substance abuse evaluation to see where you're at because you have been in for a long time. Continue to address your mental health and then today, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You
Thank
too.
Good luck, Jake.
Thanks, Newton. See you guys next month.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
13 seconds. 13 seconds was the total amount of time that this roach used to give the detail and to talk about the crime that was committed on this child. The rest of the interview was to make, I'm the victim. I'm the victim. This was done to me in high school. This was done to me by my mother. This was done to me by the system. 13 seconds was what was done to that child. To an 11-year-old boy entrusted in the hands of a babysitter. Oh, he was spending time at my house. And then I was all messed up because in high school I was, this and then I was drinking and it's like sounds like this person's totally off the wall and it's like it comes out that they were just drinking on the weekend. Like who doesn't do that at 19 years old? The parole board's patting on the back. You're doing great. You're awesome. Good job. Go get out there. Yeah. You might want to give some credit for the idea that this roach was able to transparently describe all the risk factors, like fantasizing about sexual assault and fantasizing about children. But and I think you have to give credit where it's due that there was transparency around that fascination. I do, because we don't hear it. But knowing that, wouldn't you think that maybe it's safer for this person to remain behind bars? In the way that it was described, the feelings of turning numb and all this, like getting that was scary. In the final statement, I want to, when I get out, to not be so like self-centered and focused on myself. Yet meanwhile, in this entire thing, there was 13 seconds. It was from minute mark 3:15 to minute mark 3 minutes and 38 seconds. That was all that was used to talk about the crime. And it was so vague. I committed sexual assault, second. And indecent contact with a child. But I only did it because now blame. This stuff gets me so pissed off. And again, it's like, who are you going to blame? You're going to blame the roach who's, has serious mental problems, who is, just wired differently. They like children. What can you do? Or you blame the system for not protecting our children. And this judge, now let's keep in mind, this inmate who's locked up in a male prison, who is registered under a male name, who's, in the registry, who's Justin Adam DeMoss, sentenced by the judge, refusing to take accountability found guilty in a jury, filed 2 appeals claiming innocence, okay? In both appeals claiming innocence, not taking accountability, making a 13-year-old boy victim get up on the stand. This is the type of person who we're dealing with. Would you have known any of that by watching this parole hearing? Then you get locked up, and on the taxpayer's dollar, you get to have the treatment to fulfill your... That to me is crazy. It just is. This should not be taxpayer responsibility. It just shouldn't. We have people that are dying. We have veterans that can't get medical help. We have law-abiding citizens who have worked their whole lives who can't get the help they need. But in prison, you can have a total voluntary type of expensive process done because you feel like it? You get locked up, 25-year sentence for sexually assaulting a 13-year-old child who was entrusted in your care over and over and over and over again. And then when you're locked up on a taxpayer dollar, you get to have your transition? I don't care what you do on your own time. I don't care what you do on your own dollar. By God, I'll support you. Hallelujah. But on the taxpayer dollar, while in prison, make it make sense. And this isn't just Iowa. We have seen this in Connecticut. We have seen it in Utah. And I know there's going to be everyone coming on here and saying, Mandoo. Cancel Mandoo. Let's read this appeal. You know, because we do live in a world now where the predator or the abuser seems to have more rights than the victim, than the children. That's madness. And this channel speaks on behalf of the victims, who you realize that there was no one here speaking on behalf of the victim. I don't believe that there are problems with whatever. I have no proof of it. But in many cases, the victims aren't properly notified. And we've never seen a DA show up in an Iowa hearing. I don't know if it's just something they don't do. Background facts and proceedings. Sometime around May 20th, 2005, 11-year-old CG reported bad touching by DeMoss. CG was interviewed and examined on May 31st, 2005. The medical examination revealed no physical evidence of sexual assault. The physician who performed the exam, Dr. Mark Esther, nonetheless concluded, based on CG's behavior and statements, he had been assaulted no more than 20 times, but at least 4 to 8 times or so. The same day, Sheriff Daniel Johnson located DeMoss. He told DeMoss he wanted to talk to him at the law center. DeMoss agreed to go with Johnson and rode to the front seat of the patrol car. DeMoss asked Johnson why they were going to the law center, and Johnson told him they would talk when they got there. Sergeant Todd Stewart joined Johnson and DeMoss when they arrived. DeMoss signed a statement waiving his Miranda rights. When asked if he knew why he was there, DeMoss answered he had heard rumors involving himself and CG. The officers told him that they knew about the situation and advised DeMoss to tell the truth. According to both officers, DeMoss answered their questions and admitted to fondling CG at least 12 times and performing this, and how that is still only with him 10 or 11 times. He then wrote out and signed a 3-page statement describing how he had gone from babysitting CG in November 2004 to being his friend and to being a sexual partner. In April and May 2005, DeMoss was friends with some of CG's older siblings and had helped babysit the younger children, including CG, while their mother worked late. In November, CG's mother asked if CG could move in with DeMoss due to CG's behavioral problems and other difficulties. While the mother worked late, CG's mother asked if CG could move in with DeMoss. Due to CG moved in with DeMoss on November 20th, 2024. The arrangement was only supposed to last 1 month, but CG continued living with DeMoss for 6 months. How does this happen? Come on. Oh, come on. That just doesn't make any sense. During some of that time, DeMoss shared an apartment with 2 other individuals. According to DeMoss' statement in February 2005, CG allegedly began, come on, Mom. What the hell? Allegedly began both asking DeMoss, who was homosexual, about DeMoss' sexual orientation and questioning his own orientation. It was at that time that he's 11 years old. DeMoss wrote that the two began to see each other. DeMoss claimed he told CG that they could not engage in sexual relationship due to their age difference. DeMoss and CG moved into a 2-bedroom house on April 20th, 2005. According to DeMoss' statement, it was at this time he and CG began engaging in sexual activities. The statement goes on to describe in detail progression of those activities. It states the two had intercourse 11 times and oral 3 times. The statement also mentioned hand to genital contact, but does not say specific number of occasions. At trial, DeMoss testified he never had contact with CG. He stated his written statement only recounted the rumors he heard about himself and CG. He also stated officers gave him suggestions for details and dates. CG testified via closed-circuit television. He stated DeMoss took off their clothes and touched. I'll put the links in the description. It's just so sickening. On the second day of trial, DeMoss moved for mistrial. The mom should be in prison with him, frankly. On second day of trial, DeMoss moved to mistrial. The trial judge had asked the court reporter outside the presence of the jury whether any witness had yet spoken to issue of identity. The court reporter acknowledged no one had pointed out the defendant. The judge told the court reporter to advise both attorneys. The judge had asked whether identity was in the record. Both attorneys agreed there had been no evidence as the identity court heard arguments. Concerning the motion outside the presence of the jury, they denied it. The state recalled Sergeant Stewart's identity to DeMoss. I don't know. The jury found DeMoss guilty of 11 counts of second-degree sexual assault, abuse, and 12 counts of indecent contact with a child. Why is it not first degree? They're saying, would first degree... I don't know. The court sentenced him, I guess first degree is it's just not consent, though. But I guess they're saying that if it would be more physical pain or something. The district court sentenced him to indeterminate terms of imprisonment, not exceeding 25 years on each count. Second-degree sexual abuse imprisonment exceeding 2 years, blah, blah, blah. The court ordered sentences to run concurrently. It also issued a 26-year no-contact order for the child and his family. Now, here's what's crazy about this, I'll tell you, which is in his appeal, there was a lot in the appeal, but in the appeal, one part of the appeal was the no contact order, to remove the no contact order. And believe it or not, that was the one part that won. No contact order vacated and remanded for sentencing. So even through all of this monster was saying, no, I don't want the no contact order to exist. And the court agreed. I asked Richard, I said, how is that possible? Richard basically says that it was, apparently they felt that the law applied to the no contact order violation was wrongly applied. So the order was nullified. It seems that the parole board still has in place a no contact order, which is great. But I don't understand why they thought it was wrongfully applied. They bring up here like a confession letter that was brought up in the appeal. DeMoss never gave the child a letter. In the letter, DeMoss asks CG forgiveness for the one thing that happened one night. He states his conscience is full of guilt. He also references CG getting out of bed and going upstairs when someone came to the door. At that point, the letter states, reality began to sink in for me. Sixth, DeMoss testified most of his written confession was true, including the child's reported interest in sexual orientation and the perception that the house was their first place together. The only parts he denies are those having dealt with sexual contact. Finally, DeMoss concedes there is evidence sufficient to convict him of one count of second-degree abuse and 2 counts of indecent contact. We conclude there is sufficient evidence to support the jury's verdict. And then there was another appeal. I don't, where DeMoss acknowledges he has certain responsibilities and expectations to abide by because of his age and maturity level, but admits he let his thoughts, feelings, and emotions get in the way first, and that was wrong. Although DeMoss claimed at trial the letter was an apology for a kiss on the cheek. It's the same letter. A jury could assess his credibility and reject this claim. I don't know. There's another appeal that they wanted to change the venue. So, anyways, the one good news is yes, I think 20 years in prison, which is just much more than what we're used to seeing. I mean, let's be real, we're used to seeing 2-3 years for this type of stuff. Richard has the notes here. 85% would have been 21 years. So I don't think the 85% is even there yet. But the good time date was going to be 2028, 5/10/2028. And there you have it. I mean, that this was called a good parole hearing is madness. I don't think he got anything out of it except knowing that this person at least identifies the core interests and fantasies are, which are scary and dangerous. Very scary and dangerous. And this just reminds me of how important it is to always go into the bathrooms with your children, because you don't know who's going to be in there. You can never be too safe, because the world permits monsters to walk amongst us. And we just saw one that's about to get released. And with that, I'll let you go.